gentlemen, my name is John Belkowitz. I am the Director of Research and Development at Intelligent Concrete, where we specialize in concrete research, development, education, litigation work. The purpose of today's presentation is to do a concrete Q&A. Any freaking concrete question, we can answer it. We got some folks who sent us some direct messages. So we've got 4 questions set up, and I'm going to run through each one. Minute, 2 minutes, no more than 2 minutes, and then if we have any questions, and once in a while I'll do something like this, if we have any questions from those in the audience, we'll answer those. But I want your most difficult, on the spot concrete question, and if you stump me, I'll get you a steak dinner. Again, any concrete question, if you stump me, I'll get you a steak dinner. All right, so the first question is, why does concrete crack? And the answer is concrete cracks because it starts with the letter C. Next question. No, I'm joking. Concrete cracks because the hydraulic reaction, when you add water plus cement, there's a certain volume change. There's a specific test, ASTM-C 1608, which is called a chemical shrinkage test, which actually measures over a 24-hour period the change in volume that the hydraulic reaction will go through during that 24-hour period. And it's just because, for cement to go from powder to liquid to a hardened rock-like state, we actually have to use the water to dissolve the cement particles so that we can reorganize or polymerize into that backbone of concrete strength. And we convert that water into something else, therefore there's a volume change. And oftentimes with concrete, we're putting it on the ground. So you have a volume change, you're putting it on the ground, there's a bunch of restraint or stuff stopping that volume change, and the concrete needs to release that energy, and it does it in the form of cracking. Other types of cracks out there, those surface cracks, and you can get that from blessing the slab with water, overwatering, and again, there's volume change because of evaporation. But I think those are the 2 main reasons that folks were curious about. The next question, what is the difference between cement and concrete? That is a weak question. I don't want questions like that. We already did a video on that, so I'll answer it quickly. Cement is to flour as bread is to concrete. So cement is an ingredient in concrete. I was about to say bread. So check out our YouTube video on that one. We go into a lot more detail. The next question is, why are concrete admixtures, or what are concrete admixtures, and why do we use them? Okay, so concrete admixtures are any type of liquid or dry chemical that we put into concrete to get some type of feature and benefit. When we started using concrete millennia ago, we were using blood, lamb's blood. What was that for? Lamb's blood was for air? I think it was an air training agent. The more common practice now is using synthetic chemicals to either control the amount of air in severe freeze-thaw environments, to make the concrete more fluid with less water. We need water for the hydration process, but then we have something called water of convenience that gets our concrete to a certain fluid state. There are certain water reducers that we could use to increase the flow while reducing the water, and by reducing the water we make it stronger and also last longer. So that's why we use them. It's anything from making the job site easier, either we don't have enough people on the job, or a lot of steel congestion, or it's a weird type of form, or it's a really big job, or there's some other features and benefits that we want to get out of it. Either maybe it's lightweight, we want it to be more chemically resistant to acid attack or ASR, but those are the primary reasons why we use admixtures. And there's a plethora, a wide variety of admixtures out there, everything for de-icing, salt mitigation, corrosion mitigation. So that leads us up to our last question, unless we got something from the audience, which I don't think, no questions. Come on, folks, ask me some tough ones. The last question we have is why do we use steel in concrete? And that's a great question because both production of cement and steel account for a very large portion of our carbon footprint. So, using the two together, we're trying to reduce the amount of one that we have to use in a larger volume. We're trying to create a composite material. But the reason we use steel in concrete, we call it reinforcing steel more often than not, is because one thing that concrete can't do, well, there are many things it can't do, like make you a cup of coffee, but the one thing that concrete can't do as a material property is deal with tensile strength. Concrete is a ceramic-like material or a brittle material, and when we bend concrete, you want to grab me that reinforcing beam? So when we bend concrete, or when we pull concrete, it'd be a lot easier with the. And this is Jeff Gomes, everybody. Jeff, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
So when we bend concrete, when we make a concrete bridge, a beam, a truss, when it bends, we're putting the bottom fibers here, we're actually stretching them out and we're putting them in tension, similar to what we do with a steel wire when we want to stretch it out. It's that same type of tension. Unfortunately, the material property of concrete, that backbone of concrete strength, the hydrated cement matrix, specifically the calcium silicate hydrate, it's not like steel. Steel allows for something called atomic dislocations, where if we have two atoms sitting side by side, the steel, when it is elastically or plastically deformed, those atoms can stretch apart, and when it's still in its elastic region, those atoms will still come back together to their original shape. And that elastic region is pretty big, and even if we get past that elastic region into the plastic region, where when we pull those atoms apart, there's a certain point where we keep pulling them, they won't go back to their original state, but they'll deform or they'll stretch, or necking is one way of saying it. Necking. Concrete, while it does have an elastic and a plastic region, both of them are really, really short. So we can go through that plastic region where we deform those two concrete atoms that are sitting side by side, but unfortunately it gets to a point where, just like the steel, it plastically deforms. In our industry, with our material, when it starts to plastically deform, it almost immediately or catastrophically fails. And it's a very, like I said before, brittle material, so once it goes into that plastic region, the energy will have to be released, and those two atoms that bond in between them will just split, and thus our concrete fails. So that's why we go ahead and combine our concrete with reinforcing steel. And what we normally do is, if this is our concrete beam right here, we'll look at it, the cross section, we'll put those concrete bars, and assuming they're going in and out of this concrete model right here, this beam model, we'll put those reinforcing steel or rebar in the tensile zone. So again, if our beam bends like this, our tension is going to be in the lower half of our beam, while the compression is going to be in the top half of our beam. And then along the middle is our neutral axis, where nothing's going on, just a nice little party. But we will put our steel reinforcement in the concrete on that bottom edge, or close to that bottom edge, that bottom half, so that it can take over in that tensile zone where we know the concrete is going to fail. So that's our final question. I was able to answer every single one of them, so nobody gets a steak dinner. Let's see if we've got any questions. All right, Jeff, you had one question.
How do you get rid of efflorescence?
Oh, I don't know. I guess you won. Steak dinner, woohoo! So efflorescence or radiance is a migration of salts to the top surface of our concrete. And I guess the backwards question, or taking a step back, why do salts migrate to the top surface? Well, the cement matrix is nothing but a bunch of salt. It's a bunch of salt with a bunch of silica in there, calcium and silica. And there's a whole bunch of other salts in there, so sodium, potassium, calcium, we just talked about calcium. But there's also a lot of moisture in concrete. Normally when we make concrete slabs, and that's what Jeff's talking about, we use a water cementitious, so that's weight of water over weight of cement, somewhere around a 0.40, maybe a 0.55. And what happens is, and the reason why we use it again is that water of convenience, but what happens is when we mix our water, the residual water that has not gone through the hydration process, what that water wants to do is go from a high pressure to a low pressure. So it's going to effectively be squeezed out of the concrete, almost like an orange, you would squeeze juice out of an orange. And when that happens, when we squeeze that water out, or when that moisture vapor emission comes out from the top slab of the concrete, comes through the body of the concrete, through the top of the slab, it normally carries with it these salts that were originally in the concrete. And the most notable one is calcium hydroxide, which when we combine cement with water, we yield two products, two phases. Calcium silicate hydrate, which is our backbone of concrete strength, and our calcium hydroxide, which is, some folks like to call the cancer of concrete, with neither bonds to itself nor anything else, and in the presence of water will dissolve back into solution. So when that solution migrates and the water comes out the top of the slab, it leaves those salts on the surface. So based off of all that jazz that I just told you, what you should hear is that there's a chance that I'll never be able to correct that. Because you can power wash the surface, and a lot of folks have this on their driveways, especially if their driveways are new, and they can't get it. They'll power wash it, you come back a week later, it's like, holy shit, not supposed to cuss on this. So, sorry about that. But they'll come back a week later and there'll be salt all over the place again. They pressure wash it again, there'll be salt all over again. It's because that water and that salt is coming from the body of the concrete. And even if you seal up your concrete, well, sealing up your concrete doesn't stop those salts from migrating from bottom to top of the slab. So how the hell do you do that then? How do you fix the problem? And one easy way is covering up your entire slab. I don't recommend it, but if you have a slab that was made poorly and the problem is that bad, you can always put something on top of it so you can't see it happening. It's called a Band-Aid, hiding the problem. Another way of doing it, if you can attack the concrete, or if you can get to the concrete while it's still in its plastic state, some of those admixtures that we talked about before are designed to stop that migration of vapor and that migration of salt to the top surface. So anything from colloidal silica to using high range water reducers that reduce the amount of water that you need for convenience will densify your mix up, reduce the amount of pores, because that same YouTube video we were referring to with what's the difference between cement and concrete. We talk about how concrete is a concrete sponge, it's a hardened sponge. So if you can reduce the amount of pores in that hardened sponge, you can effectively reduce the ability for that moisture to migrate through the concrete body and then the concrete surface. So that would be the best way of doing it, which is not difficult to do. Anybody you're working with, you can tell them, hey, I want to make sure we order a low water cementitious concrete. I want to make sure that we're using an additive that has anti-efflorescence features and benefits to it. And then if that doesn't work, you can always, while the concrete is still in its plastic state, use a finishing aid to densify up that surface so that, again, the salts and water can't migrate through to the top surface. Did I answer your question?
It does. How?
Oh, we got another one.
One
Two for the
more.
price of
That's
one.
a two-part question.
Sure.
I'm a homeowner, and I don't know the difference between this concrete and that concrete. All I know is I look at it, and it's multiple colors.
Wicked. Oh, wow. Is it on purpose multiple colors?
No,
or?
it's efflorescence over there and over there and over here. We got 5 different trucks that came in, all different slumps,
For a homeowner who doesn't know much, you just use some pretty good jargon right there. Go ahead. So this hypothetical homeowner who seems to know a lot about the concrete industry has no idea. Sure, go ahead.
Is there anything to do to clean it up so it looks
halfway decent.
close in or more identical to each other?
Um,
I know you said power wash, but
Power washing will take care of the problem immediately. There are chemicals that you can buy out there that it can be added as a retrofit, is what we call them. Everything from silicate-based densifiers. They're a little bit hazardous material. You remember that movie Fight Club? When he kisses his hand and he puts the powder. I mean, that was a chemical burn from, I believe it was a silicate, but silicate-based solutions can cause chemical burns, and they're pretty nasty to get rid of. So when you're using that stuff, you want to use as little as possible. And I think it's somewhere around 200 to 300 square feet per gallon. You want a uniform coverage rate. So I would pressure wash first. Get everything uniform, get all that salt off, and once you pressure wash it with a pretty high bead or fairly strong bead, you should be able to get it. Do a uniform color. Don't use that small spray. Make sure you use a fan, because you don't want to start making marks in your concrete. You can even come back and put muriatic acid on it to get a more uniform clean off the surface, but then you have to come back and pressure wash it. After that's all said and done, after you've cleaned it, you want to spray either silicate-based solution or a colloidal silica-based solution, and what that will do is densify the surface. It'll actually work with those salts that have migrated to the surface. It has normally a silica in there that will combine with those salts to create more of that backbone of concrete strength, that calcium silicate hydrate. And most of them have a depth of penetration somewhere around 1/4 inch, maybe a little bit more. And that's really all you need, is creating that cap to stop that efflorescence. And once you notice that efflorescence has stopped, and it should take a week, maybe 2 weeks to notice it if it's actually worked, then what you should come back and do is seal it. Because a lot of times the reason people have efflorescence is not just from salt coming from the negative side or from the bottom up, but also from the top down. Whether you're driving on the highway on Route 64, if you're driving on the highway, a lot of road salts, you'll catch them up underneath your car, they'll get on your tire, and then you're just going to put them on your driveway. So that's what I would do. And with those materials, there's enough information online. If you type in concrete plus densifying the surface, I mean, shoot, 3 companies come to the top of my head right now. I mean, for products that could take care of that solution.
I guess no steak dinner for me.
No steak dinner. That's okay. Every Wednesday, 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, we can answer every single concrete question. I don't care what it is. Hold on, we're telling more followers to join. Yeah, so if you ask a question and I can't answer it, we'll get you a steak dinner. Thanks again for your time. Don't forget to like, subscribe. We've got a whole bunch of media out there that talks about concrete, new and emerging technologies. Let us know if you have questions for Wednesday. Go concrete, beat asphalt. Have a great day.